a bad protocol. I don't think it's necessary to start with a high dosage, and I don't think it's necessary to start with HCG, and I hate the idea of doctors putting patients from the start on an aromatase inhibitors. What's up folks, it's Uranus, we're in Brussels, welcome to another video. So what is the ideal TRT or testosterone replacement therapy starting protocol? I received this question very recently on my YouTube channel and it made me think how I would have liked to start my TRT journey years ago. So we're gonna talk about compounds, way of administration and frequency of administration. I've seen some crazy shit online recently of doctors prescribing high starting TRT dosages alongside enclomiphene, and we're gonna talk about that too. Now I say this in every video, this isn't medical advice, I'm just an idiot that suffered from extremely low testosterone levels for pretty much more than a decade, and I like to share my thoughts, but I'm not a doctor. Alright, c'est parti. So you've been diagnosed with low testosterone and you want to replace what your body is no longer producing down there. Now I would take the progressive and conservative approach. That is, I would start on a protocol of 100 milligrams of testosterone every week, and I would split this into 2 injections every 3.5 days. I think injections is the easiest and most effective way of administration too. Now that is my starting protocol. That should provide you with steady levels all week long. So injection straight away. I would skip the gel or the topical way of administration. I was on gels for quite some time and I find it really annoying to smear all over me after the shower. I'm quite hairy, I have quite a lot of body hair, and I never knew if my body was absorbing the gel properly or not. It's more difficult to reach stable and consistent testosterone levels in your blood. Here in Belgium it is much more expensive. It increases your DHT, so if you have male pattern baldness it can actually increase that process of miniaturization, and there is always the risk of contamination. Like I would not be able to hug my girlfriend after they're applying it on me. Or I made a video in my short YouTube live career, I made a video about a kid that showed signs of very early puberty, like at 3 or 4 years old. He was much bigger than the other kids, he had a bigger penis and so on, because it turns out that child was contaminated by the testosterone gel of his father for years. Now unfortunately I cannot show you the example anymore because his mother threatened to sue me because there were pictures and so on, but just take my word for it, the contamination risk is actually real. You can't go to the swimming pool or anything like that either after you have applied it on you. And personally I found it annoying to smear it all over me. Jabbing my leg, much easier. It's the same thing with patches. Patches are not so common here in Belgium anyway, but I would skip those ways of administration. Oral testosterone, stay the fuck away from that. That is dangerous for the liver. In Belgium we don't have any oral testosterone, but I know in some countries I've seen some people taking that form of testosterone. Just skip that. I heard it's really negative, it's really bad for your liver, it can create liver toxicity and it's not very safe. Now pellets, it's not my thing. Here in Belgium I've never heard of that way of administration. I also don't like the fact that you have to have quite a small procedure. They have to put it inside of you, and I like to be in control of my testosterone levels more, and I wouldn't like to have pellets every couple of months. And as I said, I don't think it's available in my country, and I'm active on a lot of TRT subs and so on Reddit, and I'm not hearing a lot of success stories with people on pellets. Maybe if you're a certain age and you don't want to worry about your levels all the time or whatever, it can be an easier solution, but I personally would not recommend it. I think injections are the most safe, common and the most consistent way of administration. Then the compounds, I would opt for one of the more popular esters out there. Now in the US they mostly use testosterone cypionate. In Europe it's more testosterone enanthate that is most commonly used. Both will guarantee you very stable levels depending on the frequency of administration. Now if you don't know what an ester is, basically testosterone has to be esterized, because otherwise if you would inject pure testosterone into your body, well, your body would metabolize it in less than 1 hour. It would be in and out of your body. So attaching an ester into the carrier oil of your testosterone allows it to be progressively released into your bloodstream. Otherwise, you would basically have to inject with testosterone almost every single hour. Here, most esters have a half-life of between 5 days and a week. There are some esters with a longer time of action out there. I know some people have success with Nebido or testosterone undecanoate. There you have to inject every 10 to 14 weeks, but personally, as I've said before, I prefer to be more in control of my testosterone levels all the time, and I doubt that you are staying stable for like 14 weeks in a row. Personally, I think you're still going to have a high and a peak if you inject a very large dose of testosterone every 14 weeks. It's a possibility here in Belgium. It's actually available, Nebido, but I have zero experience with that compound. I know some people have success with it, but personally, I do not want to try it. I like to inject twice per week with a shorter ester. Now, I would forget about cocktails like Sustanon. Sustanon is basically the most commonly used testosterone form here in Belgium. It's actually the only one available in the local pharmacies. If you want to buy testosterone enanthate like I do, you have to use compounding pharmacies and you have to buy it from another country, because if a doctor is prescribing TRT to you, basically here you have a choice between gel, Nebido and Sustanon. Now, Sustanon contains 5 different esters. It is great for muscle building purposes, but I think for HRT, if you want to be stable all week long, it is best to focus on just one ester. So I'm buying mine from a compounding pharmacy online, and I would start with 100 milligrams of Test E per week, split into 2 injections to guarantee a steady rate of testosterone all week long. I'm a big fan of starting on lower dosages and then adjust according to necessity. Now, of course, we're talking strictly in a purpose of testosterone replacement therapy. So you're supposed to be in the reference range, preferably in the higher reference range. But 100 milligrams per week is already a good starting dose, considering that a healthy male produces between 5 and 7 milligrams per week. So ideally, you would start with that protocol of 100 per week, and then after a couple of weeks, let's say a month and a half, you would have some blood drawn on true day. What it means true day is that it's the day where your testosterone levels are supposed to be the lowest. There's a high day, a peak, and then a true. Now, of course, if you're injecting twice per week, you're never that low or that high, but ideally what I would do, I inject on Tuesday evening and Saturday morning. What I would do is take blood work on the Friday morning, the day right before my injections, and then see how your levels are. If they are too low, then you can increase to 125 milligrams per week or 150 milligrams per week, depending how your body is reacting. But ideally, I would only start with one compound. Now, I've read stories online of endocrinologists starting their patients on testosterone, on HCG, on an AI, and on enclomiphene at the same freaking time. And that's not the way to do things. You're adding 4 compounds just to replace your testosterone, and in the end, you're gonna end on a hormonal roller coaster, and you're basically going to feel like shit. And I have a lot of guys commenting on my channel that they were on TRT, they're not anymore because they felt like shit, because they started with a bad protocol. I don't think it's necessary to start with a high dosage, and I don't think it's necessary to start with HCG, and I hate the idea of doctors putting patients from the start on an aromatase inhibitors. Aromatase inhibitors should only be used technically if your dosage is too high and you're aromatizing too much, because if you're only replacing what your body is supposed to produce and you're in the normal ranges, you should not need an AI. Some people out there, a very small percentage, will need an AI regardless of what is going on. But for the majority of people, starting on an AI straight away, it's not good for you. I'm not an example here because I am on an AI articule. I am on an aromatase inhibitor, Arimidex. But if I had to start all over, I would start on the lower dosages and eliminate that shit, because on the long terms, AIs, they're not made for men in the first place. You're gonna fuck up your lipid profile and you're gonna have long-term consequences because of it, and the risk of crashing your estrogen is also there. So I would start with a much more simple way, 100 milligrams per week with nothing. I mean, I've seen some crazy examples of people getting prescribed 1.5 or sometimes 2 milligrams of arimidex per week on a protocol of 125 milligrams of test per week. You're gonna crash your estrogen, you're gonna fuck up your body and feel like shit, and that's not the purpose. Anyway, when you're starting TRT is basically going to be for the rest of your life. So you have to make a choice, and if you have to start on a lower dosages of 100 milligrams per week and then see how you're going to evolve those first 5 or 6 weeks before your first blood work, even if you're too low, it's not gonna matter that much in the long term, because TRT is for life, but you want to feel good and not be outside of the reference range. If we're strictly talking about TRT, I'm not a very good example here because my levels are above the reference range. I'm always testing on true day, and even on true day I'm over 1000 nanograms per deciliter, and my free testosterone is twice the reference range, so I'm not a very good example here. I also don't really understand why a doctor from the start would put a patient on testosterone and at the same time on enclomiphene. Basically, they're two different things in my opinion. Enclomiphene is like used in a PCT scenario where you want to reactivate your own HPTA. If I understand the way of the way enclomiphene works correctly, it's basically blocking some estrogen receptors, and your brain is perceiving that your estrogen levels are too low, and it's reacting by releasing LH and FSH. So by taking testosterone, you're shutting yourself down, and by taking enclomiphene, you're trying to reactivate your own freaking system. And if at the same time your doctor is putting you on HCG, and I've seen people that were like on 150 megs of TRT, on enclomiphene, I don't remember the dosages exactly, but that were on 2,000-3,000 IUs of HCG at the same time and an AI. For me, that's just medical malpractice starting with that protocol. That's just a doctor that doesn't know their shit. First of all, you start with 100 milligrams and then you build up. You see, if you're too low on true day, then you increase the dosages. You want to keep your fertility, that's fine. Get stable first and then add HCG. Test your estrogen too, preferably with the sensible test. Of course, if it's high, you're also going to have side effects. That's why ideally with the TRT, you want to start on a lower dosages to avoid those side effects. More isn't necessarily better with testosterone replacement therapy. Then I think personally for me, 2 injections per week is the best, because you avoid any highs and lows with that things. But most people can get away with 1 injection per week. If you're injecting like 100 or 125 milligrams per week, that is still a viable option. I just still think that you want to avoid those highs and those values. HCG can also be a little bit more tricky because you don't know how a specific individual is going to react on HCG. Some people feel like dog shit on HCG, regardless of the dosages. Some people, if they take 100 IUs of HCG, will feel like shit. Others actually need it for their libido and their cognitive function. So it's really case by case. But if you want to keep that fertility option on TRT, you're gonna have to somehow keep your testicles active. And then of course you have to put the HCG in there. From the medical research I've read, it's possible to be on TRT and to keep testicular functions with a couple, like 3 injections of 500 IUs per week. Alright, so to conclude all of this, 100 milligrams, 2 injections per week of 50 milligrams every 3.5 days, and then you have some blood work, and then you build up and see. If you have a smart endocrinologist, I think that's how he will start you, and not make things too complicated with AIs and some other shit. That was it. That was my opinion on the matter. Ending it here. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what your starting protocol was and what your endocrinologist actually put you on. Kindly do the YouTube things, like the video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll catch you on the next one. Uranus out.